Hello everybody, welcome to a new video. So this video is going to be apex speeds, overslowing, and stuff like that. So there's someone on the comment last video and he said that he's overslowing, he feels like he loses a lot of mid-corner grip when he takes more apex speed, and he also has a habit of trail braking too far into the apex and thus causing overslowing. He says if he coasts, it sort of rectifies it. So it's sort of a mix of problems there, but I think, so I was doing laps in Imola just now, just getting some practice in for next week's IMSA and also for the track guide. And on this lap, I sort of got an understanding of where he was coming from, and we're going to look into it. So we're going to skip ahead, because this was mostly fine. And then I'm going to break it down. So this is all good. Bit of an off track there. That was due to understeer, dropping the brakes too quickly. But no. So there's a lot of reasons why you could be overslowing, but I think the main one is you're smothering the tires. If we go into paint, we have to take into account this one little thing. Oh, stupid Windows update. It updated me into 24H2, which has some major stuttering issues and the back with vengeance, so you're gonna have to bear with me. But so we have a traction circle, right? And in it, we can only use 100% of the tire grip. When we say that a driver is outperforming the car, that's not true. They can't be outperforming the car. It's just physics. You can't just break physics. Like Max Verstappen, people say he's outperforming the car. He's magic. He's not. He's a very, very good driver, one of the best. But he doesn't outperform the car. He just maximizes this full potential of the tire when he's driving. So we can split this up into two sections, really. So we can split it up. Let's say that was a straight line, a halfway line. Sorry, because my mouse is on the floor. So there's a halfway line there, and we can split it up into two parts. We're going to do red as, longitudinal grip, and blue and green as lateral grip. So that's longitudinal and that's lateral. But first I'm going to go through what is longitudinal and what is lateral grip. Longitudinal grip is on the forward back axis, and lateral is on side to side. So lateral grip is generated by the steering, longitudinal grip is generated by the brakes. So now that we've got that covered, let's look at why we may be overslowing. So if we're on the brakes too much, so let's say we're on the brakes too much here. Let me just turn off race laps. So what happens, we actually decrease the potential of our tyre. And I don't know how to get back into the selection. There we go. We actually decrease the potential of the tyre for the lateral force, which means that we will overwhelm the tyre. And what happens? Usually we'll get understeer, and that'll tell us to slow down the car more in the next time we come round. And it's sort of like it feeds itself. It's a constant loop of I'm understeering, maybe I should slow down a bit more, causes you a less apex speed, and then the same again happens next lap. You smother the tyre with too much brake, and then you take a lower entry speed, and what happens over time is that you will generate lower apex speeds, which will cause you to overslow. Well, that is overslowing. That's essentially what it is. So let's look. I think it was this lap of when I did the same mistake. So that was actually from the way that you do that, the maximum potential of the tyre, and where do we find that? Like what feedback do we get that tells us that we're at the 100% potential of the front tyre? If you guessed the force feedback, you'd be correct. The force feedback stiffens up, and it goes on its stiffest point when we're at the peak force of the tyre. So let's say we can test it almost. So do you ever see like racing drivers sort of jab the wheel but subtly during mid-corner? Usually it's because they're actually testing. Is the car going to react to more steering angle here, or is it not? If it is, that means I'm probably not using the full potential of the tyre. If it isn't, that means, okay, I'm near the peak of the tyre performance. So they actually test during a corner by jabbing the steering just ever so slightly. It's like little wobbles in the steering, every so often, and they test the peak force of the tire because you have to think the front wheels have self-centering forces on them. So the steering actually gets heavier the more load is put through them. So the peak load, you'll feel the peak stiffness, and any more steering angle, you'll feel giving out of the tire. It will lighten up in your hands. So this is where light hands becomes really important. Lighten up your hands and just feel where the maximum resistance point is and hold that angle. So here we can see we're on the brakes just too much. We smothered the front tires, which just caused this weird slide to happen. And I fell into the same mistake as a lot of people do. Next lap I'd be like, okay, well now I need to slow down more. But that's not true. What I should have done is just use less brakes but carry the same apex speed, and actually the car would have reacted better, would have rotated easier, and I could have got on the power earlier. And you say that you have oversteer on exit, which I also find very interesting. So oversteer and exit is caused by mainly this. You wind too much lock on, even if it's just a subtle amount. So when you get back on throttle, the car tries to go in that direction, and what happens? You get oversteer. So when you have too much lock on, the main symptom of having too much lock is A, you get understeer, which is when you use exponentially more lock, so sometimes it's actually not a good indicator. And B, it's oversteer on exit. If I'm getting oversteer on exit, that means I'm using too much lock. And you'll see it right here, I'm pretty sure. Boom, too much lock. So when I got back on the throttle, the car was just so unsettled because it's just got way too much lock on. So that's what causes the oversteer on exit. So if we combine the two main problems that I've just outlined of smothering the tires on entry, you get understeer, and then it turns into snap oversteer. This is the worst combination you can have, and it is infuriating to deal with. And if I'm honest, I struggled with it a lot when I first started sim racing, which was about a year ago now, I think. Yeah, about a year and a half maybe. I was using too much lock, overwhelming the fronts, and then it would cause me to get on the power later, but also with too much lock on, which caused me to oversteer on exit, which to me was an indicator because I was still pretty new and I didn't really use telemetry at the time. I didn't at all, actually. I was just like, okay, well now I need slower entry speeds, and that rectified the issue of the understeer snap oversteer. But then you overslow into the apex, which is your main problem. So I think that's where you will be going wrong. But there is another scenario of, I didn't do it this lap, but I don't think I did it at all here, is braking too early, which is also so coasting, can we get this straight? Coasting, sometimes it's actually pretty useful, but it's only in quite rare corners. You don't want too much coast. It should be very minimal. I do not coast at all in this car. I've said it many times, I don't. But sometimes it can be useful, such as unwinding corners, like Portimao, some of the second to last corner, it unwinds, so coasting is actually, can be useful here, there. But on these corners, mostly here at Imola, there is one corner where coasting can be useful, which I will show you. But for these corners, you don't want to coast. If I coast, then I'm like, okay, that's a symptom of overslowing. So the best exercise I can give you is trail brake right up to the apex and see if you're overslowing. If the car literally feels like you're crawling by the time you got to the apex, that means you've broken too early. So you need to push that braking zone forward a little bit. I used to make the same mistake when I started, because if I broke later, I feel like the car would get so unsettled and I'd just get nervous with the car. And it was like, if I was in a race, I'd really hold back and I'd be really bad in a race, but good in like quali, not even quali, because I'd get like, because there's pressure. But just in practice, I was good at hard lapping, but I wasn't good in races because of this exact issue. I was braking too early and it would cause me to coast, and then I'd get on the throttle later, which caused me a lower minimum speed. Because when I talked in my last videos about coasting, we assumed it was a constant speed, but in reality it's not. It's not a constant speed. Why? Because you have friction, right, on the front tires, on every tire. you have air resistance. So the car is going to slow down whilst you're coasting because you have 0 watts of power being deployed to the wheels. Yeah, so I hope that makes sense. So when we coast, it's a symptom that we're overslowing, and we should aim to dial it back a little bit and get just if you coast, because I know sometimes in GT cars coasting can be useful, again because the car sort of settles before you get on throttle, because when we think of trail braking, right, the front suspension dips down just a little bit. These race cars very stiff suspension, so it's not a whole lot of movement, but they do dip down ever so slightly. So when you coast, actually the car's just neutral pretty much, because you have no weight transfer now apart from lateral, but that's a different aspect. So your car's now neutral. But the thing is, in certain cars such as the Porsche Cup, those are very rear biased. Because why? Because they have the engine in the rear. You have to think about front engine and mid engine cars. Some front engine cars fair coasting. Why? Because the weight's over the front, right? But some of these cars like the Porsche, they actually don't like too much coasting because the weight is biased to the rear. So you have to think about that as well. A mid engine is more neutral, so coasting can be useful again. Although you can see in this GTP, coasting is not useful. Well, 99% of the time it isn't. So we have to think coasting is a massive symptom of overslowing. And if you find that you have more grip whilst coasting, it's probably because you've overwhelmed the fronts. That makes sense because you've used too much longitudinal force, you've used too much of that traction circle, so then you coast, and then you give more grip back to the front tyre to stop overwhelming it, and it feels like the car, okay, it's coming back alive again. But what if we look at trail braking, just think about trail braking in itself, what is it? It literally just puts more load on the front tyres, and it just slows us down ever so slightly. And if we go to the centripetal circuit, and we do a trail brake, or we just brake, our turning radius decreases. So why, when we coast, do you feel like the car is more pointy? It's 99% because you have overwhelmed the tires. So I take a big look into that. You'll know that you're overwhelming the fronts because the car just goes all like, it just doesn't react to your inputs. When you trail brake, the car should feel very pointy. Like the car right now, when I trail brake, usually it feels right on the edge. If I had 1% more, it would mess up the balance. If I had 1% less, mess up the balance. It's on a fine needle. It's like the most finest thread of the needle you could ever imagine. So let me walk you through a corner where coasting actually can be useful. And it's something that's sort of, because I've burnt it into my brain not to coast. So it actually is pretty hard not to coast through here. But this corner, why? Because it unwinds. So you see, I didn't coast there, but I guarantee if I went to an earlier lap, I probably would have coasted because it unwinds. So here coasting is actually not too bad. Again, no, but coasting here is not too bad. It's not really a symptom of overslowing because the corner unwinds. So why would we still be on the brake when the corner unwinds? We don't want to decrease our turning radius too much when we're on unwinding corners. So we have to take that into account. But for 99% of corners, if you're coasting too much, that's a symptom of overslowing. And if it's either one of two things. If the car feels better under a coast to the point where it feels like it's more pointy, like you have more front end, it means you've overwhelmed the fronts during corner entry, probably means you're braking too late. If you coast because you're overslowing into the apex, it feels like the car's going to crawl when you're on the brake, it's probably because you broke too early. So there's two main things. And then if you get the oversteer on exit, it's usually because you've been too aggressive, you've got on the throttle too early because you were impatient, another symptom of overslowing, because you're going to be sitting there whilst you're coasting, you're going to be like, when can I get on throttle, when can I get on throttle? Or if you're overslowing on the brake, you're going to be like, when can I get on the throttle? And usually you'll be impatient and get back on the throttle whilst the corner is still, is still tight, and then that causes you to oversteer as well. But then there's another aspect of it of you probably have too much steering angle on corner exit, which causes you to oversteer. So there's so many different ways that causes this overslowing. So you just have to experiment and check which one is for you. which one applies to you. So there's multiple different sections to it, if that makes sense. You have to just go out on track right now and just think about which one of those that I just mentioned applied to you. So to recap, if you're coasting too much, probably a symptom of overslowing. But how is the car feeling when you coast? Is it more pointy? Then that's a symptom that you're overwhelming the front tires with too much pressure on the brake. Is the car really lazy whilst you coast, or does it just turn neutral? Then that's a symptom of, okay, I slowed down too much into the apex to the point where I had to coast, otherwise I'd go 1 mile an hour. So that's a symptom of braking too early. Am I getting oversteer on exit? Then that's a symptom of, I have too much lock on, so let's look at telemetry, compare myself against a faster driver, see where he gets back on the power, and then compare my steering angle at the point of where he gets back on the power. Am I using too much steering angle when I get back on power? If yes, great. Use less. Use a tiny bit more percentage of the brake when you get back up, just before you get back on power. So then you can use less steering angle, which was a video that I made a while ago. And then another reason is because you're just impatient, because you've been coasting for too much, or you feel like you're overslowing, which is what we just covered. And then you want to get back on throttle when it's not a good time to, because the corner's still really tight. So there's multiple different ways, but I hope that one of them at least applied to you. But yeah, thank you for watching.